subjective well-being is 50% heritable, 10% circumstance, and then 40% is your thoughts, actions, and feelings. You're not 100% responsible for it, but even if you're a little bit, why wouldn't you do something to fix that?
As one of Australia's top DJs, Tom Nash is no stranger to massive crowds, but after falling ill as a teenager, he was actually given a 10% chance of survival.
Life can be whisked away from you at any point. The world doesn't owe you anything. Like, yes, put in effort, do the hard work, and if nothing comes of it, that's fucking life. Mm-hmm. It's unfair and it sucks.
Do you fear death?
I don't fear what's after death because I don't think there is anything after death, and therefore I can't fear it. I try to remain a realist about things. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. I'm hoping that by the end of my life, I will know nothing. Being thrown in the deep end is very much a sink or swim situation, right? So if you fall into the comparison trap of comparing yourself to others, there's nothing but negative outcomes that will come from that. I have this framing technique that I like to call the author. So when you're faced with a decision that you have to make, you imagine yourself as this 80-year-old author looking back on your life, and you say, what decision would I have been proud of myself for making at this point?
What's your piece of wisdom or advice?
Nobody cares about your life as much as you do.
It's interesting that when I looked in the back end of our YouTube channel and it says 95% of you that watch it frequently haven't yet hit the subscribe button. So I have a small favor to ask. If you've ever watched this channel and enjoyed the content, please, can I ask you a small favor? Please hit the subscribe button. It honestly helps this channel more than I can explain. And I promise you, if you do that, I will return the favor. We will make this show better and better. That's a promise that I'm willing to make if you press the subscribe button. Do we have a deal? Tom, welcome to the Betar Project Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Every story has a beginning, and I want to pass you over this photo. This little boy.
Hey, where'd you get that? Have you been talking to my mother?
Maybe. Take me back to that little boy, because I've also seen you quote that, half of my life was not fit for literature.
Yeah, that was probably an underestimation.
Yeah, there we go. The photo's there. How old were you in that?
I have no idea, but I could probably work it out. I mean, I'd say 4 or 5. That was at my Aunt Pamela's wedding. Mm-hmm. So I was the ring bearer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I think my only memory of it was going through rehearsals where I'd have this ring on the pillow and I'd have to walk down, and I kept dropping it. I was rubbish at it.
Was it an expensive ring or what?
I have no idea. I can ask her, actually. She's coming over from the UK for Christmas, also because it's my father's 70th birthday this year.
Yep.
And so he's having a party for his 70th birthday. She wants to be there. And so she's going to stick around for a couple of weeks. So hopefully this podcast comes out before she gets here, and I can ask her how expensive the ring was and exactly what year it was. But I'd say it's late 80s. Yeah.
Take me back to that boy. What was the context that myself and the listener need to know about you to better understand the man that sits in front of us today?
That's an interesting question, because actually Lauren and I were just having this chat on the way here when we were driving. My memory of my childhood is very hazy, particularly when you're talking about this age. But one thing that I remembered was being obsessed with space. And I think in the 1980s, we'd just come out of at the tail end of the space race. And I was living in the United States. Actually, in Texas, which is close to Galveston, there's a lot of space stuff that goes around, like NASA and stuff like that.
I think that's where Elon Musk is all based now.
He's in Austin now. Yeah. So I was in Dallas, which is like north of the state. Mm-hmm. And is that one of the birds?
No, it's a bird that pops up at this time every day.
Oh, really?
It will do its thing for a while, and then it'll piss off.
That's fine. Yeah. And so I remember watching this movie called Flight of the Navigator. It's a movie that not many people will know, even if they're of my age, but it's about a young kid that lives in America that gets abducted by an alien in a UFO. But it's kind of like a fun kids movie where the alien is like a jovial, joking kind of artificial intelligence that's imbued the intelligence of the world and the earth and humans. And he develops this relationship with it, and it flies all over the place. And that started my obsession with space. And so I really liked space when I was a kid. I liked dinosaurs. Jurassic Park came out when I was maybe 12 or something like that.
All-time favourite movies, Jurassic Park for me.
Jurassic Park's great. And so I had various but fleeting interests as a kid, I guess. And then when I hit my teens, once I'd moved to Australia, I started getting interested in playing music, and I found a guitar underneath my house where I was living in Rockdale.
That's an interesting place to find a guitar.
It is, yeah. Under a house or in Rockdale? Both for very different reasons. Yes. Yeah. It was this old Yamaha acoustic guitar, and so I thought I would start to try to teach myself, because it came with a book and everything like that of chords. And yeah, I mean, largely self-taught, but I really enjoyed the process. I loved music. I wasn't classically trained or anything like that, but I progressed further with it. And then by the time I was 18, I had a few gigs playing in like restaurants and stuff like that, just covers or 50th birthday parties or whoever would hire me. But yeah, I never really took it further than that in my adolescent years.
Why not?
I think I probably had that sense that I wasn't good enough to start a band, or I wasn't good enough to let most people hear my original music or things like that.
Did you have a lot of self-doubt growing up?
I'm not sure whether I'd call it self-doubt. I try to remain a realist about things, and I sort of have been acutely aware of that trajectory where, you know, at the beginning, I think they call it the Dunning-Kruger effect, you know, where in the beginning you know nothing about something, you know so little that you don't even know what it takes for you to be good, and therefore you can't know how bad you are at that thing. And it's only when you start learning things that you realize how little you know. And that kind of, the trajectory of that is exponential. So I'm hoping that by the end of my life, I will know nothing. That's the trajectory moving forward. Yeah, because the more you know about anything, the more you realize you don't know about everything.
Yeah, there's so much that we don't know.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes that needs to take a back seat to you just being able to put things out there and just try things. And so when I'd gone through losing my arms and I decided I was going to learn how to play the guitar again, once I got around the physicality of that, playing with the hooks, it's almost as though that completely dwarfed any of the self-consciousness I had about playing live in front of people or starting a band. And I just thought, well, you know, life can be whisked away from you at any point. So why not just try the things that might make you happy? And if they don't, they don't. That's fine. But, you know, you can't be judged on anything that's not out there, that you haven't presented to people. And I think that was probably the first turning point in my life where I thought things don't have to be perfect, but feedback is the most important part of any creative process. So yes, start a band, record some music, go out and play some gigs. Even if it's horrible, you'll know better about your skills and limitations in the field of creativity than if you didn't do that at all.
That's it. You just got to start.
That's right. Well, I mean, you might experience this with your podcast, right? There might have been, you know, months or even years where you would ruminate on, am I doing the right thing, or am I doing it the right way? Or at the end of the day, you've just got to start doing it. And you learn more about that process as you go along, and you're going to come more quickly to a perfect version or an authentic version of that thing than you would if you just sat there thinking about it, internalizing it for years.
Yeah. As a society, there's so many people that just sit there and think about what they could do instead of actually taking action. And, you know, referring to my podcast, for instance, in the beginning, I had no clue what this would turn into. 4 years ago, I couldn't even really construct a conversation. I was that shy, quiet, introverted kid, you know, struggled a lot with social anxiety and anxiety in general. So if I was put in a situation like this where there's 3 other people in this room and a dog, I'll be like, shit, what is going on right now? Yeah. And I'll be breaking into a sweat. But by starting the podcast, by putting in the repetitions, have gotten to a point now where I can sit here and have a conversation and have confidence in myself that I can actually hold this conversation.
Yeah.
And it's just by starting and putting in the reps each and every day.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And that's where you build confidence. And they speak about confidence as in, you know, write down these affirmations and stuff like that. You don't build confidence by yelling affirmations in the mirror. You build confidence by going out there and taking action. And through taking that action, what are you doing? You're building up this book of evidence of, hey, I can actually do this. And then you look back and like, okay, cool. Well, what am I afraid of? I can actually go and pursue this. Yeah, so many people get caught in that beginning stage of, I can't do this, without even actually taking their first step.
One of the things that I think people fear and why there's so much inaction around doing things is because they fear how other people perceive what they do. And I think it's ironic that would be a barrier, because I think people judge your actions more than they do your words or your thoughts, and rightfully so. I think actions are more important. Anybody can talk a good game, you know what I mean? I realized this the other day. I was sitting on the couch with my dog Caesar, and he knows all of the what would you call them? Like clues or indications that I'm about to stand up from the couch. He knows them before I know them. He's like really in tune with it, right? And it's around dinner time, right? So he's just staring at me and he's like waiting for me to get up and do something. I remember looking at him and I was like, oh, like, it's at dinner time, And he knows that word, or he knows the word food, but he didn't get excited. He's like just waiting. And as soon as I did something that was indicative that I would stand up, he got really excited, like jumped down, and he's like, okay, it's happening now. Because he instinctively knows that actions matter and words don't. So he's highly attuned to the fact that, he's about to do something, not he's just saying something. And I think instinctually people are like this as well. We respect people who actually do things, not just people who say things.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words. For you, was it that pivotal moment of going through losing your limbs to make you realize, wow, I just need to take action in my life and not care of, the fear of judgment of others? Yeah,
I mean, it's an iterative process, and obviously there is a particular spark there that makes you think, you realize how limited your time is and that you don't want to waste that time with people that don't enrich your life or doing things that won't fulfill you. Absolutely. But I think the more that you lean into those things, they are self-fulfilling in their own way, because the reward is the process. Yeah. And you realize that the more time you spend doing things that actually reflect your values or make you a more authentic person, they are their own reward. And so you're constantly incentivized to act like that. So it's not as though you wake up in the morning and think, oh, okay, everything is different now. But you would slightly realign your incentives and motivations, and then before too long it snowballs and you just become someone who optimizes for that more than not.
What's the process like for someone to actually, optimize their performance in your view?
Optimize their performance?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean,
in taking action like we've just been speaking about.
Oh, I mean, that would be completely different for everyone. I mean, for me, it was just running a candid audit of things that made me happy, right? So when I got out of hospital, I was thinking to myself, I was studying psychology before that, and I thought I was just doing that because it was expected that I go to university, and there was nothing that the university offered that I necessarily wanted to do vocationally, right? And so I picked something that I just had an interest in, and I'd read a bit about. I studied philosophy and a bit of psychology before university, and I thought at the very least, this won't bore me, which, for the most part it didn't. But it was not a means to an end. I'm paying for a university education, something that I could probably just read books and I'm not going to work in this field. And so that was one realignment for me, I guess. And it was just like, pick something that you don't hate. It doesn't have to be like a passion or something. Like for me, I just think that's kind of, a little bit dubious at best. And also I'm the kind of person that I don't like to follow any passion I have vocationally. I've been burnt before.
Why's that?
You think about music, right? I don't like the word having a passion for something, but the closest you would get for me is something like music. You make it a job and you ruin it, right? Because then your career or your money that you're earning is at the behest of this, right? I like my relationship with DJing now better than I did 5 years ago. So now I DJ maybe 4 or 5 times a year. I don't need to do it. I get my income somewhere else. And so every time I do it, I enjoy it more. Whereas 5 years ago, that was, a responsibility to earn a crust. And I think it just kind of, it cross-infects it a little bit too much for me. I mean, everybody's different, but it's not for me,
I get that point of view, but we live in a world now where everyone's like, chase your passions and do what you love. And there's so many people that go to jobs that they hate and their main goal is to, I guess, get out of that to do what they love full time.
Those aren't your only two options, but like things that you're passionate or things that you hate. Like there's so much in the middle. There's things that you're good at that you don't hate. That's not a passion, but it's a skill that you have. Yeah. It's a use that you can give to society. I don't think it's that black and white. You want to don't spend your life doing something you hate. That's obviously ridiculous. You know what I mean? But I think it's fine to be doing something that you don't mind, but you're really good at. I think, function over passion a lot of the time is a great mantra. Nobody's saying you don't have to do your passion. Just careful if you want to get paid for it. If you're a painter or something like that, you want to do that on the weekends, that's fine. But if you become a painter and you're at the behest of people who are constantly telling you to commission artworks that you don't necessarily want to do, it might kill your passion for painting. So...
Yeah, I can relate to that because growing up I was playing rugby league and the goal was to play at the top level. But it got to a point where I was playing semi-professional and it became like a job. And that's where I lost my passion for it and then I stopped playing. So I totally understand that point of having a balance between, yes, doing things that you're good at, not going to a job that you hate, but doing something you're good at and you have a skill set in, which then will allow you to, say, bring in the income to then focus more and do more of the things that you actually enjoy and that you're passionate about.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And I mean, we even saw it, like Chris and I saw it when we started the club, and the club was good because it sort of freed us up to be able to write music, let's say. So it's not as though we had fun at our nightclub, but we liked writing music. And initially we were producing and writing music on our own label. We're our own bosses and at a pace that we were comfortable with. And then as soon as you get signed to a label, like, your Ministry of Sounds type thing, they will approach you and they'll say, well, we need a song to come out in a couple of months. And it needs to be this kind of thing. And this is the framework and these limitations. And we find ourselves writing music that we don't necessarily like.
Just to put it out there.
Because it becomes a requirement of this new job that you've selected for yourself. So, look, I mean, everyone's different with it, but I think I would just be careful. And I think those people that say, like, follow your passion, there's a lot of survivor bias implicit in that where, somebody gets lucky following their passion and gets famous being a film director or a fucking tech entrepreneur, and then they think that they can transpose their journey onto other people's experience and that all that person has to do is to follow that one pattern or habit that they did and they'll be successful. What a way to fuck up your expectations, right? There was that weird movement, I think it was like 5 or 10 years ago. I had a few friends that were working in like Silicon Valley at tech startups, and they were like, everyone's acting like Steve Jobs. Like they're expecting people to stay up all night, and then they're just walking into the room and yelling at people. Some of them are even wearing like turtleneck jumpers. And it's like, you can't just take that aspect of an entrepreneur, transpose it onto your own situation and expect the same outcome, right? And it's the same with follow your passion. Like you hear follow your passion from people who were lucky enough to have been successful following their passion. For every one of those, there's probably 1,000 that tried following their passion and it fucked up in their face. Yeah. Why don't you hear from them? They're not on podcasts.
I did a podcast about a month or so ago with someone that's in the business space, and he goes, I try and speak everyone that I talk to out of business, because the people that truly want it and that are truly going to be successful in this space, they're not going to care what you think about. They're just going to go and do it anyway. The same thing goes with passion. If someone goes, oh, nah, don't worry about your passion, just work this job, well, then are they really passionate about it? Do they actually want to pursue it? If they are, well, then they're going to ignore what you say and they're going to go and do it anyway. Yeah, we have so many people that are, I'm going to follow my passion, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. They don't understand the work that goes into it. And as you said, they have these massive expectations, and when they're not met, they beat themselves up and they go into a dark hole.
Yeah.
And then just negative connotation after connotation.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that would happen to some people. And I think the other thing to keep in mind would be like, inspect what about this activity is actually that you're passionate about, right? Are you passionate about the end result and being famous for having created some app, right? Or are you passionate about the process?
Yeah.
Like the distinction between the process and the result is something that people, that's my dog, that people often... I think you can't separate that, or they don't look at the process there, because all they're doing is they're looking at people who have done it and they say, I want that life, not what's gone into it, you know?
Yeah, what's involved to actually get there.
Yeah, that's
the
right.
journey.
And so for me, like music was, what I really love about music is the collaborative, the writing process. I like producing music. I like playing with friends. You know, and around that, a way to become like a well-known DJ that's producing good music and playing festivals, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into that, whether it be, you know, social media or branding or marketing a club or working out drinks lists or guest lists or fucking, you know, like it's just bullshit kind of. That's not really what you signed up for. And so, yeah, it has the ability to stain whatever you once had a passion for. And so I don't tend to optimize for passion. I try to optimize as best I can for what I'm good at and what I can give other people. So what are my value systems currently? It's just like, what kind of value can I offer to others? A lot of that is conversations like this, or writing books, or, you know, talks like I do now, whatever it is. I like that aspect because if it's not useful to people, and I imagine for many people it isn't, they're free to switch off. It's not didactic in that way.
So what would you say is like your mission or your message that you're pursuing in life right now?
Yeah, my sort of purpose in life for the most part, more recently, is to be an effective communicator of ideas. And that would be, you know, potentially around overcoming adversity and maybe also somebody that thinks a little bit differently to most of the people in my space, I would say. Well, follow your passion is a good example, but another one is that, you know, anything is possible. I don't believe that's true. I think managing expectations is a really important part of overcoming adversity and also dealing with challenges and negative events. So I'm a huge proponent of reframing, like psychological reframing of things, trying to turn negatives into positives. I don't like resilience. I like anti-fragility. I don't think everything happens for a reason. I think it's your fucking responsibility to create the reason. And so I think a lot of the stuff that I talk about is a bit counter to what you see in the space. And so I think that there's a need for it, at least to some extent, until somebody comes along and says it better than me, you know, then I have to find a new job.
So you don't think what happened to you happened for a reason, to put you on the path that you're on now?
No, not at all. What reason? And who made it?
That's true. That's a good question. But then if you didn't go through what you went through, you wouldn't be sitting in front of me today. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, if you weren't born in this area, I wouldn't be talking to you today. Like, none of it matters. It's just where we find ourselves. Look, reason in life implies that there's some sort of an omnipotent force that is imbuing the world with reason or design. And, you know, you have to say, if that's the case, it's some design, isn't it? So I think it's a pretty poor design, if you ask me.
Do you believe in like a higher power or God or anything like that? No? What's your views on that?
Atheist.
Atheist?
Yeah. A strict agnostic, technically, but largely atheist, yeah.
Did you grow up religious at all, or just...
No, my mother isn't religious, but sort of believes in more spiritual stuff, which I don't. My father, I think, is just an atheist, although we didn't really talk about it much growing up.
Yeah.
I went to a Catholic school for a year and a half, which I thought was a bit weird. But it was interesting because I always had a deep interest in religion, and I studied religion at school. It was an elective, actually. I took it even though I wasn't religious. because I found the difference between religions. So I studied a bit of Hinduism, a bit of Buddhism, a bit of Islam, a bit of Christianity, just on the surface. I kind of find it fascinating.
What about it? Do you feel like there's lessons that we can take from these different religions and implement in
is, things that we know deep down in ourselves, and probably written up during a period where it was necessary to build a community around a particular set of ideas, which for a long time was probably quite a necessary thing to do. They added a lot of other stuff that is a bit deleterious to my mind, but and now it sort of acts as this relic, at least in my mind. But different parts of the world, go through different processes, and I think economics has a lot to do with it. When you're lucky enough to be in a country like Australia, where we're so fortunate economically, there's less of a need for religion than there is in some parts of the world, where there's less hope.
Yeah, so the religion brings that hope and that faith. And I've always been interested, say, for example, in the Bible, and you just mentioned like it's written by people. How do we know it's true? Like it's a guess game. You kind of have to have hope and faith, right?
Yeah, that's the whole thing is based on that. Yeah.
So is that why you're more so you don't believe in that?
I mean, no, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, like none of it makes sense. But it's not that I don't believe it was written by people. I absolutely believe it was written by people. I just don't believe any of the mystical claims that,
You got chucked in the deep end with everything that happened. Probably the biggest thing you realize is no one gives a shit, and it's up to you to get yourself out of it, right? What was that journey like to realize, fuck, no one cares, it's up to me, because we live in a society of comparison. This happened to me, but this guy's living the life over here, and understanding that we're individuals. Shit happens. How did you come out the other side and understand, like, hey, it is what it is, kind of thing?
Well, I think you kind of said it in the question there, which is that being thrown in the deep end is very much a sink or swim situation, right? So if you fall into the comparison trap of comparing yourself to others, I mean, there's nothing but negative outcomes that will come from that. People fall into this trap all the time, even if they're not experiencing challenges or adversities, sometimes in the opposite way. So rather than being comparing myself to what someone doesn't have, it might be, this person has it far worse off than me, therefore what am I complaining about? You hear this all the time. It's like, why are you complaining about being stuck in traffic or, being demoted from your job or something because there are children starving in Africa? I mean, there aren't enough children in Africa that could stop starving that's going to save your job. Your problems are your own problems. You better deal with them, because sweeping them under the carpet is not really helping anyone. And it also, you make a clerical error there, which is that if you're going to live your life feeling good about the fact that there are people worse off than you, you should probably feel bad that there are people better off than you. So it's already a non sequitur idea before you get out of the gates, right? And then you compound that with the fact that it's not really pragmatic or helping anyone for you to take that kind of approach. It's an easy way to not deal with your problems, sure.
Yeah, we are just...
But it's fucking useless.
Yeah, we're sweeping it under the rug. So if you were to give, say, one piece of advice for someone right now that's struggling, that's going through adversity, and automatically they're playing the victim card, what's your piece of wisdom or advice for them?
I have this framing technique that I like to call the author, being the author. And it's an exercise by which you project yourself into the future and imagine yourself as an 80-year-old author of your own autobiography. And so when you're faced with a decision that you have to make, you imagine yourself as this 80-year-old author looking back on your life, and you say, you ask yourself a series of questions, which is like, what decision would I have been proud of myself for making at this point? And you imagine that you're writing this memoir of your life, right? And memoirs are seldom a dispassionate account of random events, right? They have trajectories, they have ebbs and flows, and it's a journey. And the central character, the protagonist, is you. So you have all the benefit of being the person that you're writing about, the subjectivity involved there, but you also have the objectivity that distancing yourself provides, looking back on that and saying, like, how would I be proud of myself for having come through this scenario? What decision is best for me and the people around me? You can ask a bunch of different questions. It's just a framing technique that I like to use. I thought of it recently when I was writing my own memoir, which I released this year, because I was forced to be in that situation where I'm casting my mind back to all these times in my life. And, I wrote 150,000 words in total and ended up publishing 75, right? And the things that I cut out, I was like, well, some of it is just not fit for consumption or whatever it is. But, some of it, I thought to myself, well, I wish I'd done that differently or whatever it was. And then I contrasted that with people asking the question, and I'm sure you've been asked, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self? Which, vaguely interesting, but not really. I mean, like, it's useful to some people, maybe an 18-year-old listening to it, but they probably don't even care anyway. The better question is to ask yourself, like, how would you respond in this situation through the eyes of the future author of your autobiography? So I'd say use that in any situation to try to inform what might be the best or most authentic way for you to tackle challenges.
Off the back of that, hypothetically, if, the 80-year-old version of you was in this room right now, what's a piece of advice or something that matters to you in this day and age that you feel like you could potentially forget down the track, but you feel it will be incredibly important to that 80-year-old version of you?
Oh, stay curious.
Yeah?
Stay curious, yeah.
Why's that?
It's one of the only things in my life that makes me constantly feel alive and refreshed. So like learning about new ideas, and there's a sense of, it makes you far more humble as a person. As we just talked about before, like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Yep.
And there's an infinite amount of information that you can learn. And I think curious people interest me more than incurious people do. It's like the idea of being the imposter, which I've talked about a few times. I've had a sense of imposter syndrome in my life.
Do you feel like an imposter today? Or?
Yeah, of course. Yeah? Why are you talking to me? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you've got a whole bunch of people on your podcast that are probably experts in whatever. Like, I'm just sitting here talking shit and you're listening for some reason, right? Now, the imposter syndrome is important because, I mean, for me, like going through playing guitar without hands in front of a crowd of 300 people, or starting up a nightclub, playing all these music festivals, doing TED Talk in front of thousands of people, speaking at business conferences. What business conferences am I speaking at, right? Some of the biggest business conferences. Why are they asking me? I'm always the imposter, right? But then I realized that that's a great position to be in, because when you're in the imposter, you always have things to learn. The expert has nothing to learn. All they're doing is imparting knowledge onto other people, and they're not growing. They don't have to be curious. The imposter is constantly trying to find their way, like navigate around new situations. They're meeting new people, learning new ideas, going to places they wouldn't have. Why wouldn't you want to be the imposter?
Exactly. And I feel like an imposter doing this podcast. I'm like, why did you come to my podcast? Like,
yeah. I can't be an imposter. You can't be an imposter if we're in your place.
But yeah, it's like I reached out to these people and they say yes, and they come to the studio. I was like, wow, like who am I to sit here? But it's the fact that I'm curious and I want to learn. And I think what makes it a great conversation is, one, you be interesting, and two, me be interested in you. And then also myself be interesting, because it's just all this curiosity going around. It's
totally,
like,
yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you about this, and you ask me about this, and it's like, oh, okay, and then let's talk about that in a deeper level. That's what makes an amazing and deep conversation, which adds value to not only each other, but the people that listen to this too.
Yeah, but like you were saying before, it makes you better as well.
That's it.
I earlier this year, I was lucky enough to do a live interview on stage with Richard Dawkins, right? Now, I'd read his books when I was in my 20s. This guy's, he's like the Charles Darwin of today, right? Mega famous guy. There is no reason that I should be sitting on that stage doing an evening with Richard Dawkins.
What's going through your head when you're sitting on stage?
I'm not an evolutionary biologist, right? I'm not. But I got asked to do this maybe a few months before the tour was happening. So I had to fly to Perth and do this thing. And I've interviewed a lot of people in my life. I'm not bad at interviewing. But when you're talking about someone like Dawkins, I don't have the chops, right? Like I don't know enough about evolutionary biology or science to be able to, I had to balance between his encyclopedic esoteric knowledge about evolutionary biology and an audience which I only have to assume knows a little bit about it, but obviously not as much as him, and try to link those very two disparate dispositions while being entertaining somewhat and not letting it become like a dry interview. And it was one of the hardest things I ever had to prepare for. I was like drawing on friends of mine that were scientists, asking for things that I should ask about, learning myself, rereading books. And the process was not just, this is a great credential to be able to have interviewed Richard Dawkins, but I got so much better at not only knowing the discourse, but actually knowing how to construct an interview with someone that, has this esoteric knowledge of something I know very little of, and how can I make that entertaining? So the process made me better as an interviewer, but there was no reason to have selected me to do this, right? So imposter syndrome, 10 out of 10, but I think I'm better as a result.
That's it.
Yeah.
And coming back to building that evidence up of, hey, I can actually do this now.
True. Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
build off the back of it.
Yeah, that's right.
I love your approach to public speaking. And it's not about, hey, this is what happened to me, like a sob story kind of thing, and victim and people going, like my life's so good, I got all my legs and hands, stuff like yours is more so, okay, I went through this stuff, this adversity, I come out the other side. Like, what is your main value and lessons that you're trying to get out of your talks that you do? Yeah,
so, I guess there are quite a few, but right now a lot of it is centered around anti-fragility, which I touched on before.
What is that?
So anti-fragility is the opposite of fragility, right? So you have something that's fragile, and the complete opposite to that is something that's anti-fragile. Basically, it's something that benefits from stresses or disorders, right? So something that's fragile, if you put stresses on it, it will break. Something that's anti-fragile gets stronger from stresses, right? The gentleman over here, Josh, looks like he lifts a lot of weights, right?
Josh, do you lift weights?
Do you lift weights? Yeah, of course he does, yeah. Now, his muscular system is anti-fragile because he puts stresses on his muscles, his biceps, whatever it is, and they get stronger through that. Whereas something like a wine glass is not that, or that bottle there is fragile. If we drop it on the floor, you need to get a new bottle, right? Resilience is something that's in the middle. Resilience might be sort of like this table to an extent. It's largely unaffected by disorders, but it's not getting better from stresses.
So it can take load, but it goes to a certain point before it will crumble.
Yeah, a rock is resilient, right? It will take thousands of years of erosion for it to change its shape. And I just think it's odd that we're telling people to be resilient because it doesn't indicate that we're growing or getting better as people through adversity or challenges. So if there are ways that we can be anti-fragile, which I believe is something that was imbued upon me through otherwise unfortunate circumstances, such that I feel like a stronger person now from having gone through this adversity, tragedy, whatever you want to call it. There's quite a bit of scientific research to suggest that this is true. A guy called Tedeschi and Calhoun published a couple of papers on something called post-traumatic growth, which is the opposite of post-traumatic stress, where people going through trauma actually feel stronger and happier afterwards. And so I believe that I went through a transition like that, and I only started reading about anti-fragility maybe 4 or 5 years ago the concept was developed by a guy called Nassim Taleb, who's actually an options trader. He's a finance guy. And he talks about anti-fragile systems. So, for instance, like airlines are an anti-fragile system so not planes, but the airline industry, because every time a plane goes down and crashes, there's all sorts of like audits and system updates that make every flight you get after that safer than it was before, right? So the industry rebounds in a way that it gets stronger over time. It works, Taleb says, basically in complex systems that can be anti-fragile. Like information is often best promulgated by attempts to conceal it, if that makes sense. What was that thing? I think it's called the Barbara Streisand effect. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Now, I don't know the details of this story, so I don't want to get into it too much, but there was something to do with, Barbara Streisand was trying to conceal the fact that she had a pool or like something like that at her house in Malibu or whatever it was. And all of the attempts to conceal it meant that people were flying helicopters and taking photos of her house from out. So the more that she tried to conceal this information, the more it got out.
Yeah.
So information is anti-fragile, right? People ruin their reputations the more they try to defend them, I guess. So think of anti-fragile as being something that is possible within a complex system. Now, your psychology, if nothing else, is a complex system, right? So if you can work out a way to reverse engineer growth from adversity or stresses, then you can have anti-fragile habits. So the author that I talked about before would be a really good way of doing that, right? So you're faced with a challenge, but you can employ a framing technique such that you actually act better than you would have if you hadn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I actually refer to that as, I call it mental fitness. And it's what we can work on each and every day. It's, yes, resilience is a part of that.
Yeah.
But it's like when we're hit with adversity, using that resilience to get through it, but what are the lessons we can learn from that to allow us to grow and to evolve into a better version of us? And it's something that we can work on each and every day, whether that be within our mind, our body, our spirit. And it's all these tools and frameworks that we have in our backpack that we can go to when needed. And that's how I refer to it. So I can actually relate a lot to when you say anti-fragility. It's very much a similar concept to how I describe it with mental fitness.
Yeah.
I love that you say having a future is not certain and you just kind of go on the flow with things right now.
Oh, is this in terms of like I don't set goals?
Yeah, you don't set goals.
No.
So you have no like long-term goals or anything like that? You just go with the flow and see what happens?
Correct. I probably have a vague plan 6 months ahead of me of what I'd like to do. I'm open to that changing almost all the time. And anything beyond 6 months, there might be something like, look, I want to have kids at some point, but...
You do want to have kids?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Because I'm not interesting enough on my own. I need to be...
You're a pretty interesting guy.
Yeah, well, wait till I have kids.
Oh, God.
But, it'll be things like that, but it won't be, there's no specific time frame on anything like that where I'm living what I'm doing as a job. Somebody could come to me tomorrow and offer me a position doing something and I might take it. Who knows? I mean, I'm unlikely to take a traditional job because just harking back to the values thing, I like a sense of autonomy in my life. So I've always gravitated more towards being my own boss to an extent. But all I'm saying is that I live my life a much more open version of that. I don't like goal setting because in effect, it's sort of goals are something that are malleable. Yeah, I like to make the distinction in my life between what I can and can't control, and I like to keep that very distinct. Often goals are out of your control. People can move goalposts on you. Other things, like third parties, can affect them. Situations can affect them. And you can become too myopic that way, and you're not open to other opportunities.
Yeah.
If you're too narrow-minded. This is just what works for me. Most of the things that have affected the trajectory of my life have not been planned. And so who am I to fly in the face of that brilliant heuristic?
Yeah, I can relate because, so for example, my daughter wasn't planned, but it's the best thing that happened to me.
Right, there you go, yeah.
There's so many avenues within our life that are not planned. And I think it's important to, I'd probably say, have a vision or idea of where you want to head in life, but be open-minded to, hey, there's going to be opportunities that come by. As you say, if you're too focused on this one goal, there may be this massive opportunity that just goes below your nose and you miss it because you're so narrow-minded.
I mean, get in touch with what your North Star is. Is your North Star an event? Is it an outcome? Or is it a value, right? So for me, what gives me direction is my values, not what I think the outcome will be. And the reason I do that is because you are able to remain authentic to your values, like it might be, autonomy and curiosity and stuff like that. Let's say for me, as an example, it's different for everyone. I'm able to remain true to that while letting the outcome be whatever it is. If I tied myself to a particular outcome and it didn't eventuate, or it didn't eventuate in the way that I felt it would, I would probably be disappointed. And who wants a life of disappointment? And that's why I actually think, managing expectations is a really key technique for me in the way that I live my life, because I think my enjoyment or happiness in any given moment is the calculation of, the delta between my expectation and reality. Like, you see all those memes on TikTok, whatever's expectation, reality. And, what they're really saying is the distance between these two things judges how you feel about the situation, not either the expectation or the reality on their own. And so I have this trick whenever I go to stay in a hotel or go to a restaurant or buy a product on Amazon, is I immediately go and read the really bad reviews. So I prime myself to expect the worst out of something. Worst case scenario, it matches my expectations. Best case scenario, it fucking exceeds them. Right?
So you're saying
I don't know what Jane124 was talking about this product off Amazon. It's fucking great, actually. You've manufactured a good experience.
Are you saying have, in a way, low expectations of things?
Yeah, pretty much. As low as you can get them. But there is a caveat to that that I will attempt to elucidate. And that is, do you know what the placebo effect is?
Yeah.
Most people know what the placebo effect is. Do you know what the nocebo effect is?
I haven't heard of that, no.
Okay. Imagine the inverse of the placebo effect in a way. And what it is when you have expectations that are too low for a particular outcome, sometimes you don't act in a way that would make those outcomes come true. An example of this would be you're up for a promotion at work, but you so don't believe that you're going to get it that you don't put in the necessary or requisite effort that would enable you to get it.
So you match those, essentially, those really low expectations.
Yeah, the expectations are affecting your behaviors, right? So try not to let low expectations affect how you live your life, but think of everything as a gift if it's a positive.
Yeah, okay.
It's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. But as long as you're aware of those two possible behavioral outcomes, it's easier to distinguish between either of them, I guess.
What are some moments in your life where, you refer to, say, going to a hotel and stuff, but a more deeper thing where you've had maybe lower expectations, but they've turned out, very high for yourself?
Almost everything I do.
Yeah?
Yeah, almost everything I do. Well, I mean, doing a TED Talk, right, was one of them. I went into that thinking I'll probably fuck it up when I'm talking. People won't really resonate with people. TED won't like it. I mean, I've fucked up a few things, but through the magic of editing, they made it look pretty seamless.
Yep.
Which it was for the most part. Everybody at the event really loved it, got selected by TED.com to be put on the main site, now has millions of views. Great. If it hadn't done that well, I wouldn't have actually been that upset because my expectation was such that, well, this is going to be shit anyway. It didn't mean that I wasn't going to put in the effort of trying to make it the best I could. It just meant that I didn't have any expectations for it to be as good as it was.
So yeah, it's essentially going back to just going with the flow, putting in the effort, working hard, but whatever happens is going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, part of it is knowing that the world doesn't owe you anything. Like, yes, put in effort, do the hard work. And if nothing comes of it, that's fucking life. Mm-hmm. It's unfair and it sucks. Just shut up and do your job.
I was having this conversation yesterday at work, and we were speaking about someone that we both know, and they've gone through some stuff with their parents.
Someone that you and I both know.
No, that me and my work friend know. Oh. And, you know, we're speaking about, he's gone through this stuff and he's kind of using that as an excuse for how he's acting right now in life. And, you know, I sit in front of you today and you've gone through your own fair share of shit and you have this mindset. How do we tap into that? Is it just because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink? Do you have to want it, right?
I don't know. It's really difficult for me to comment on because I'm inside my head.
Yeah.
Right? Looking out. So I can't really comment on what's inside other people's heads. There's some research. This might be interesting but depressing, but I'm going to fucking tell you anyway. There's some research out, a woman called Sonia Lubomirsky, who is a happiness expert psychologist in the United States, that released some research suggesting that subjective well-being is 50% heritable. And I think there's 10% circumstance. So it could be the country you're born in, the area of that country. And then 40% is your thoughts, actions, and feelings. If we were to map those findings onto someone's mental fortitude potential, you know, we might have to agree that half of your ability to overcome adversity is largely decided by your genetics. I don't know if that's true, but I'm willing to accept that it might be. But even if it is, there's a good portion of your thoughts, actions, feelings, behaviors that probably govern, you know, how you're able to traverse those situations in your life.
Yeah, we said 40%, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was for subjective well-being and happiness. But let's, you know, if we were to accept that there's something similar going on in that, you know, mental fortitude area of life. So, look, I would say that you're not 100% responsible for it, but even if you're a little bit responsible for it, why wouldn't you do something to fix that percentage, whatever that is? And that comes down to probably stuff like you're talking about, like the mental fitness, which is, you know, just running programs in your head that you get better at over time. They seem futile and pointless in the moment when you're doing them, or they seem like you're, you know, trying to convince yourself that everything's okay, or that you can turn everything that's negative into a positive, which you can't all the time. But if something had a negativity score of 70 out of 100, you shouldn't expect to turn it into a 70 out of 100 positive. Maybe you can get 30% positive silver lining to that cloud, you know. But the more that you run those programs, the better you get at running them effectively, right? And it's like the muscular system, right? The more you lift the weight, the stronger you get.
Yep.
So why wouldn't you give yourself the best opportunity that you can, and have no expectation as to whether that will fix everything?
Just got to give yourself a chance, right?
Well, what else are you doing? Like, are you going to the movies?
I don't know. It's said that
do something better.
Yeah,
depends on the movie.
True.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an issue in society right now where a lot of people are playing victim and then they're not helping themselves. And it's like, listen to Tom speak right now. I
also think that they're not largely to be blamed for that either, because, I mean, victim mentality, I think I would posit that is more environmental than genetic, because it's been gamified to an extent by society, right? Like you get more sort of social credit points from talking about your grievances than you do anything else. And, social media doesn't help either. And so when you have a completely gamified system by which people gain points by airing their grievances, you know, you putting those people into an environment where that's rewarded is always going to produce that kind of outcome.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go and jump the gun and say that victim mentality is genetic. I think it could be environmental. That should fix itself naturally, because if it is gamified, which I believe it is, there's a race to the bottom of the barrel there, you know, and at some point, the only way to get noticed is not to play the game.
How do we stop playing this game? Because as you said, it's been gamified and society's just pushing.
Well, there are plenty of people who aren't. You're not.
No, I'm not. No,
Yeah.
but we're doing this work, and the rate of suicides is still going up.
How do we incentivize others not to play the game? Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
That's a more difficult question. I don't know. I wouldn't be the best person to ask about that, but I mean, it doesn't look like it produces very good outcomes. No. And usually in any marketplace, things that don't produce good outcomes eventually die off. So, you know, I have faith that eventually that kind of fad will dissipate to an extent, but what the fuck do I know?
Time will tell, right?
Yeah.
I think by continuing to have these conversations and people tapping into what we're speaking about today, they can, you know, realize, wow, why am I being victim here? I am in control of my life. Guess I've been through this adversity, but I can come out the other side. I can grow from it. I can be anti-fragile. I don't have to be this victim.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're in control of certain parts of your life, I guess. You know, you're not in control of everything, but knowing what you are in control of and what you aren't is probably one of the most important distinctions to make, because it shifts your focus from that which you need to accept to what you can change.
Yeah, that's it. Like, we can't control the weather, but we can control how we react to the weather.
Yeah, you can put on a raincoat.
That's it.
Yeah.
I want to talk about relationships, and I'm very interested, like, for someone that's gone through what you've gone through, and the world that we live in now, where body image and insecurities is a massive thing right now. Yet you're in a relationship with a beautiful woman sitting right there, and then you go and do something like this in this photo.
Oh yeah. How many more fucking photos you got over there?
Don't worry.
It's like, what's that show? This Is Your Life. You're gonna bring out like my dead uncle.
You go and do a photo shoot like that.
Yeah. What about it? Like,
what's the
impetus to that?
Like, why do you go do that? Like,
well, I didn't choose to do that. Toby Burrows asked me to take my shirt off, and I can't say no to Toby Burrows. He's one of the best photographers I've ever worked with. But do I have to hold this up as well?
That's all good. You don't have to. But talk to me about the self-confidence that goes into doing something like that.
Well, I mean, look, you know, confidence can come from a lot of places, and sometimes they're not aesthetic, you know? Sometimes it's your personality or your ability to disarm people. No, that's not a pun. Or just, you know, having a certain charisma about you, and that's something that I've had to develop over time as a result of an aesthetic deficit that I believed I had after going through what I had. I think, you know, when I first got out of hospital, I was a little bit more concerned about it because there was no precedent at that point. I'm lucky to be a guy. Women are far less shallow than men are when it comes to aesthetics. You've got to say, right? Like,
yeah, okay,
yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate to be a man in that situation, and you know, women appreciate things about men that are far deeper. I would say, at least on first meet, I guess. But when I moved out of hospital, it was only 2 months before I got into a relationship with someone. And she was stunning. So I was like, oh, okay, what was I worried about? I realized at that point that, you know, the things that attracted her to me were not the scars on my face necessarily, or the hooks, or whatever it was. It was just my disposition. Maybe it was my positivity, maybe whatever it was at that point. I don't remember the kind of person I was. I probably wasn't too different to what I am now, maybe a little bit more annoying. But yeah, it went deeper than that. And I thought, well, this, you know, you've got to focus on what you have, not what you don't have, and develop that as best you can, you know, like lean into. It's why like ugly men become comedians. You think about it, right?
Are you calling Andrew Hamilton ugly?
Oh, definitely. He's
See the head on him?
He looks like you should have played football with him back in whenever that was. I was going to say back in the day, but you're like 26.
I'll just say back in the day. I feel it old.
You're like, really?
Yeah. Once you have kids, you just feel old.
That's probably true. I was going to say, you said you had a daughter. You're 26. God, that's really young to have kids. I mean, not historically, but these days, yeah. She's how old?
2.
I thought you said she's 22.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, right. So you have a 2-year-old. So you had a kid at 24. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that I would imagine it would mature you and make you grow up
100%.
really fast. You know, I haven't had that experience yet, and it's one of the reasons. Well, it's one of the things that motivates me to eventually have a kid. A dog isn't the same because they stay the same age. You know, they're always 2 in their head.
Yes.
Yeah.
So coming back to the relationship piece, you know, you got your beautiful partner there. What do you feel like, you know, attracts her to you? What do you add to the table?
Why don't you ask her?
You want to come on the mic? In your head, what do you feel like the value and the attraction piece that you put out for her?
Yeah, I think that I think she finds me funny, even though she won't admit it. And I think she likes the fact that I don't do things the way that most people do. I don't follow the same trajectory as most people, and there's a lot of risk in that. But that I'm confident with that amount of risk, and I think that's something that she respects and is somewhat inspired by, I guess. Probably, I don't know, is that correct so far? She's nodding. I'll hear about it later. It's probably all incorrect. And, you know, I have hooks, man.
It's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's like she's dating a pirate.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of it, yeah.
So then, last photo.
Oh, you got more photos. Okay.
One last.
Yeah.
I think this is pretty cool.
Okay.
Why don't you look like this anymore?
Good question. I'll hold that up. This was...
So I think that's a really cool look.
You like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm 40 now, so I can't really... Sorry.
That's all right.
Your photo. It's not like you're going to put them up in your house. So there's that one. And that was when I was, I'd say probably 23 or 24.
So fresh after it all happened.
Yeah, it was right after I got out of hospital. And I'm wondering if it has, there was a period where the prosthetic arms that they gave me weren't black here.
Yeah, okay.
They were skin colored.
Oh, okay.
Which is this weird, like, beige.
Yeah.
It's no one's skin color. Even a white person, it's not their skin color. It's like a fucking orange. I don't know. It's strange. But no, I had the black ones there. But yeah, I grew my hair long because I was in a band, and you can't not.
True.
No one can be in a band with your haircut unless it's fucking Blink 182 or some shit. Right? So I had to grow my hair long, and it looks good in that photo, but I don't think it looked good generally. Probably.
And who was that version of you compared to the man that you are today?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's very hard for me to really work that out. You know, dumber, less risk averse, more fly by the seat in my pants, more hedonistic, lived more in the moment without, you know, much care for my future self, I guess. But I think that's like a natural response of going through, like coming so close to death. Like you just want to get out and do all of the things that, you know, when you were laying in the hospital bed, you thought, oh, fuck, I wish I could do that. Or, so probably, yeah, a lot like that. And that was before I started Starfuckers as well. So no DJing or nightclubs or anything. The only clubs that I've been in, ones that I would play gigs at with my band. Yeah, okay. So you're probably at that stage where after everything's happened, you're trying to find out who you are essentially now. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I still don't think I've found that out. Yes, so, it's a journey. Yeah. Hopefully I find out right before I die. You know, they say your life flashes before your eyes. What I want to flash before my eyes is who I really was. Finally get that insight. I was telling someone this the other day. It's not something I share on podcasts, but I'm going to tell you about it. I have this really weird suspicion that the minute before I die, or the second before I die, I'm going to hear a particular song in my head. And it's a song that gets stuck in my head once a month on average. And that's why I think it's going to be the last thing I hear before I die. And you want to know what it is?
Yes.
There used to be this like shoe warehouse called Paul's Warehouse.
Yep. Yeah.
Do you know Paul's Warehouse?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's got this song that's like, Paul has it all, Paul's Warehouse. Now, I haven't heard that song since the 90s. Like it was a TV commercial. But once a month, it just enters my head like this earworm type thing, and I can't get rid of it for hours. And I just have this vision of me like on my deathbed, and right before the lights go out, that fucking song plays. I don't know why. It would be fitting, right? Just something that's completely meaningless right before I die.
Fuck, that's funny. The shit that you go through your head.
Have you ever thought about like what would go through your head before you die?
To be honest, no, I haven't.
You'll probably have grandkids by then because you have kids so early.
Yeah.
So you'll be surrounded by a lot of family. You're Lebanese, so I'm guessing big family. Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I haven't thought about death, to be honest.
No, really? I think about it every day.
Do you fear death?
No, I don't fear. So, okay, let's make a distinction here. I fear dying.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be dying, and I don't necessarily want this all to end. Mm-hmm. But also I want to be in the kind of, what do you call it? Like in the shape that I am to be able to experience life properly. Like I think if I'm 100 years old and decrepit in a chair, that's not really experiencing. But who am I to say? I'm not there. They seem to want to kick on a bit when they get to that age anyway, so maybe I will as well. I don't fear what's after death because I don't think there is anything after death, and therefore I can't fear it.
So what do you think happens when we die? We just
switch off. Yeah.
Yeah? You don't feel like a spirit or a soul goes somewhere else in the world?
No, I don't believe in spirits or souls.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think it's you just switch the
Time's
lights
up.
off.
Yep.
I had interesting conversations with a friend of mine who is kind of, I guess you could call him a futurist, although he doesn't refer to himself that way because that would be obscene. But my friend Meow is very much into technology, and his name's Meow. You should have him on this podcast. And he's very much into living forever.
Okay.
And I think initially he wanted to do it. He wanted to physically live forever, like work out a technology or a reverse engineer aging or something.
There's
like
a guy
that.
in the world that's actually doing that.
There
now.
are a few.
Yeah.
And so he's heavily invested in that. But he also has recently been talking about this. It's kind of like a thought experiment where if you take the concept of AI and its ability to effectively recreate intelligence, and then you have enough of a digital footprint of yourself, could you combine those things to be like a consciousness in the cloud? Right? So, for instance, if we were to find a way to upload all of your digital footprint, all of the interactions you've had, conversations you've had over social media or your phone, and you upload that as like a brain to almost like a chat GPT, and then you made that a chat bot and I spoke to it, would I be able to tell the difference if it was Nick or whether it was the AI? Probably not at this point, right?
And if you go one step further and say you create a body and then you put that chip into it.
Yep, exactly, right? So you can extrapolate all of the things that need to happen for that to be like a version of your consciousness. At that point, you start asking the question, well, does that mean that you could technically live forever even if the body or the genetic shell that you have dies, right? So then you're forced to ask the question, well, what's the difference between your consciousness and the consciousness of this thing?
But on that, say you get all that data, once you pass, you're not growing, you're not evolving, so you're kind of stuck in that state as when you died.
Yeah, so when you die, the point at which you die, rather than being cryogenically frozen, your consciousness is actually uploaded to,
But essentially you're that same person for the rest of that, that chip. Would the chip evolve?
Well, this brings us back around to whether you think we have a soul or not. Because if you have a soul, then maybe that soul is not being uploaded. And so there's an extra part of you that isn't there, which is not you living forever, but it's a carbon copy of you that lives indefinitely. If you don't believe in a soul, there's very little distinction between both consciousnesses.
It's a very interesting conversation. It's a mind fuck.
Yeah, quite literally.
Because I guess we don't know the answer until we cark it, right?
If I could clone you,
Yep.
atom for atom, and I spoke to the clone, he would respond in exactly the same way that you do. Because up to this point, he has the same genetic composition and experiences that you've had, right? So that clone would think it was you, right? So to the clone, there's no distinction between the both of you. You're the same thing. We're a dual consciousness, right? Just imagine that like as a thought experiment, but being uploaded to a chip in the cloud or something like that, such that you could live forever, in the, I don't know, whatever the metaverse turns out to be when Facebook fucks it up.
All right. If you had an option right now to upload all your data, would you do it?
Do I die?
Yes.
Not yet. I'd wait until.
So, but when your time's up, like to die, would you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would. Yeah. Well, because it's like Pascal's wager. Like, what do I have to lose?
True.
If I was just about to die, yeah, absolutely.
What do you think that would look like? As
Dunno.
in, like,
I'll tell you when I do
let
it.
me know.
Yeah.
Let me know. We'll come back for another podcast when that happens. Tom, this has been a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
We have a closing tradition where the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest without knowing who it is. So the question for you is, Tom, what's the biggest thing you are confused about right now in life?
The biggest confusion? Oh my God, there's so much. What's dark energy and how does it work? It seems to be the thing in the universe that's making everything expand and pushing things further apart, from other things. And it matters because it matters whether the universe is infinite or not, and whether the universe is therefore cyclical in a way that, you have a big expansion and a big crunch. And then that could tell you whether we are in one way special or not, or whether we're one of a series of universes that exists in a multiverse.
Wow. So that's what you spend your days.
No, I don't spend my day, but often if I'm up at night, that's what I'll be thinking about.
You just think about these things?
Yeah. That kills me. I lose a lot of sleep.
Yeah, I was going to say, you must not sleep much.
Over dark. Not really. Not always because of dark energy, but, there are other things.
Your mind's always ticking.
But that's the one that really pisses me off, dark energy. Maybe we will work out what that is before I die. I don't think we will, but.
Time will tell, right?
Yeah.
Tom, thank you so much, man. It's been a great chat.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Can I take these photos with me?
Go for it.
Okay, thanks.